I was a much younger Christian, and yes, I'm old enough that dinosaurs were still roaming the earth at that time. When we talk about the crucifixion of Jesus, about all I could get my head wrapped around was the physical torture and the physical death that he went through. And certainly that's an important part of the story that Jesus went through for us, but it's not everything. We can't overlook the pain and the physical suffering, but there's so much more to these events for us to consider as Christians. And over time, we come to realize the overwhelming importance of the spiritual aspects of his crucifixion. And today we're going to focus on the spiritual agony that Jesus endured for us. So today we'll be reading from Luke chapter 22, starting in verse 41. And this is a depiction of the scene in Gethsemane right before Jesus' death and the prayer that he was offering to God at that time. And beginning in verse 41, it says, "And he was withdrawn from them for about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and prayed, and said, Father, if it is your will, take this cup away from me, and nevertheless not my will, but yours be done. Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground." This morning we'll spend a few moments focused in on that word agony that he was enduring. As he was offering this prayer, he wasn't in physical agony. That was to come when he was on the cross. He would be in much physical agony. This is a different type of agony. As we look back into the meaning of that particular word back in the Greek, Thayer lets us know that it means a severe mental struggle and emotions, anguish. A couple of other lexicons let us know that it is related to the root word for contest or combat, and that the concern is not about the physical death, but about the victory to come through the combat. Our word, agony, actually comes from the Greek word for combat, the very same word here. And in the New Testament, it's used to denote not the fear which draws back and flees or runs away from a battle, but for the fear that trembles in the face of the issue and yet continues on to the end. And one more lexicon says, most strictly it indicates the supreme concentration of powers in the face of imminent decisions or disasters. It's not the fear of death, but concern for victory in face of the approaching decisive battle on which the fate of the world depends. And having read those background descriptions of that particular word, I think it helps us to have a better understanding of the meaning of the word agony and what Jesus was going through at this particular time. He wasn't just concerned about his physical death. He knew it was coming, and in fact, he was committed to that. He'd been telling his disciples that he would be going to the cross to die. He was more concerned about the victory that he needed to achieve and the victory that he would achieve over sin and death. And how do we know the depth of this concern that he was going through at this particular time? Well, the verse says that he was so focused and so intense in his prayer that he actually sweat blood. So I'd like for you to ask yourself this morning, when's the last time you prayed so hard and so fervently and so intently that you sweat blood? And I would venture to say that none of us have actually done that. There's actually a medical condition, I'm not going to try and pronounce it this morning, but it's the one that causes someone to sweat blood. It's a very rare condition. Most people don't even know that it really exists or if it's even real, but sweating blood has been documented throughout history. In fact, Leonardo da Vinci once wrote about soldiers that are about to go into battle that actually sweat blood. In the cases that have been observed, it's typically induced by intense concern or fear, but it is very rare. So this gives us a perfect picture of what Jesus was going through, his intent focus on the victory to be achieved, the combat he would be going through shortly, in addition to his physical suffering, and his concern to achieve this victory so intense that he actually sweat blood. Shortly after this scene, just a few hours actually, we see Jesus' agony further reflected while he was on the cross. And recall while he was there, he calls out in anguish, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And just think about this in context for just a minute. Here was Jesus, who was the Son of God, who was with God in the beginning, who was God, and he had become man for us. And just a few hours before this excruciating cry that he put out, he said to his disciples, "Yet I'm not alone, because the Father is with me." So why at this time on the cross does he cry out in agony, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Well, Peter gives us that answer in 1 Peter chapter 2, where he says, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree. It was because he was bearing our sins on the cross that he was suffering this anguish. And herein lies the point that may be difficult for us to understand, but is of ultimate importance. His agony was something that no man could ever know. Thousands of men have been crucified through the ages, just like Jesus. Many men have died unjustly, just like Jesus. Some have feared going into battle so much that they sweat blood, just like Jesus. But Jesus is the only man to face death, knowing that he would bear the sins of all mankind in the process, and knowing that this was required to save mankind. The Holy One from God, who had been with God, who was God, was willing to face death to bear our sins, suffering as no man ever could and ever would. So today, let's recognize the depth and uniqueness of Jesus' agony. Let's feel the pain that he felt in Gethsemane and on the cross as he bore our sins, concerned about the victory to be achieved and not just his death. Let's also feel his triumph. When he was on the cross, right before his death, he cries out, "It is finished." And he knew at that time that he had completed all that the Father had given him to do, that he had fulfilled all prophecy, and that God's plan had been perfectly completed. In doing so, he provided for the forgiveness of our sins and the hope of eternal salvation for all mankind. Jesus has asked us to remember him by partaking of this supper, and we'll do so at this time.